Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Hello and welcome back to Daily December. This is video number 6 of 31, which seems crazy. I feel like I've been doing it forever and equally I am nowhere near even halfway. But so today I thought I would talk to you about my favourite podcasts. I'm about to get in the car and do a really long drive, so I'm going to be listening to a few podcasts today and I wanted to share my top 5 with you. I really like listening to them either when I'm walking or in the car because I feel like it feels more like you're having like a car journey with friends, especially if it's kind of a chatty podcast. Yeah, so I thought I was going to share those today. I did used to have a highlight on Instagram with all of my favourite podcasts, but my Instagram got hacked last week and they deleted all my highlights, so I can't access those anymore, so I've had to come up with a new list. So the first podcast on my list is the podcast that I listened to first, and that is called Serial. So Serial is hosted by, I'm pretty sure she is a journalist, and it is about a real case of the murder of a teenage girl, and her ex-boyfriend is currently in prison serving time for that murder. But there's a lot of speculation over whether he is guilty or not. So this journalist goes in and she decides to interview him and interview witnesses, and do all of her own research, use police documents and court documents and all that sort of stuff to try and get to the bottom of what happened, with the idea of using that evidence to get him out of jail if he didn't commit the crime. Of course, anything regarding the murder of a young person or any person is very sad, but this is so gripping. Like, the story, I still think about it sometimes, and I listened to it I think 3 years ago. There is another podcast called Undisclosed about the same case, and they go into a little bit more detail. So if you've already listened to Serial, I'd really recommend that you listen to Undisclosed, but I do think that you should listen to Serial first because I think she does a better job of giving you those initial details and giving the story to you bit by bit. But I would really recommend that you listen to Serial, especially if you're into true crime. Podcast number 2 on my list is called Educating Josh. So Educating Josh is kind of a current affairs podcast, I would say. And basically there's one boy called Josh and 3 other hosts. So every week each one of the hosts picks a different news story or story that they've seen online that week or in the papers or whatever, and they present Josh with a question, and Josh has, I think it's either 30 seconds or a minute to say what he thinks, and to kind of back his thoughts up before that host then comes in with sort of statistics and facts and tries to educate him on the other side of the argument that he thought. And I think that's really interesting because I'm a big believer in the fact that it's really important to know both sides of an argument, even if you know that you sit on one side. I also think they just have really interesting sort of topical debates, and because there are 4 of them and they often have guests on and things like that, it's really good for getting a lot of different points of view, and that's something that I really like from podcasts. I really like being able to learn things from people who I otherwise wouldn't come across, although I do know a couple of the Educating Josh gang. But it's a really great podcast. I listen to it every week, and it's probably the first one that I'll listen to when I drive today. So the next podcast that I've been loving is called Mile Higher. Now Mile Higher started last January and it's run by Kendall Ray, who is a YouTuber, and her husband Josh. Kendall does a lot of sort of true crime, conspiracy theory kind of content on YouTube, which conspiracy theories are, I think, my guilty pleasure. I don't talk about them very much because I'm aware that, I don't know, but some of them I really do believe. So this podcast covers such a wide range of topics. So some of it is true crime, some of it is conspiracy theories, some of it is science, some of it is space, some of it is politics. It's so interesting, and they pick a different topic every week, and it makes me think very much outside the box. Kendall and Josh have a very different perspective on sort of spirituality and different things than I do, or I have grown up with. And it's just, yeah, it's really interesting to hear things from their perspective, but also they're really great hosts because they're never trying to force their opinion on you at all. And I just think it's a really great way to learn about other people and their kind of experiences and beliefs. And yeah, some of the things they have really convinced me of, like, I do now believe firmly that aliens built the pyramids and that the Titanic didn't sink. So I would really recommend that you go and listen to those episodes specifically. But yeah, Mile Higher is great. I've listened to every single one, and like I said, it's been running for very nearly a year now. The fourth podcast on my list is called Do Go On, and this was recommended to me by my friend Meg after a friend recommended it to her, and I've recommended it to a friend of mine, and it's nice. I think podcasts are really kind of unique in that way at the moment, that the only way that you really hear about podcasts is through word of mouth. Do Go On is run by 3 Australian comedians, I nearly said chameleons, and each week a different person picks the topic, and they range hugely from films to true crime. Can you see a running theme? They cover all sorts, but those episodes have me absolutely crying with laughter sometimes in the car on my own. They are so funny. And my favourite episodes so far have been the one about Bonnie and Clyde, the one about the Dyatlov Pass, and the one about DB Cooper. They're the funniest ones I've listened to so far, but I'm still very new to this podcast, so I'm trying to make my way through. But if you just want something that's kind of easy to listen to but really entertaining, I'd really recommend Do Go On. And the last podcast that I'm going to be talking to you about today is called Just a Tip with Meghan Batoon. Meghan Batoon is a choreographer and a dancer who lives out in LA, and this is her advice podcast. So it's run kind of like an agony aunt service. She has a guest on every week, and listeners write in to ask her for advice. Not about dance or anything, just about life. She just kind of talks through the issues. She talks about her experiences that might be similar or different, and the guest does the same. And yeah, again, it's just a really interesting way to learn about other people's stories, and Meghan's also hilarious as well, and she has such a good kind of vibe. I always find that podcast to be a really kind of feel-good podcast, and yeah, again, you kind of feel like she's just your friend chatting rubbish in your car and it's just really good. So those are my 5 podcast recommendations for you today. Please do leave a comment if you listen to any of these podcasts. Let me know what you think. But also, if you have a podcast that you love that I haven't mentioned, please let me know, because like I said, I feel like the only way to find new podcasts is through like word of mouth. And so I would really love to hear your suggestions. Other podcasts that I do love are Holy Swift, which is about Taylor Swift songs. Each episode is a different Taylor Swift song with they kind of talk about the meaning of the song and why it was written and when it was written and what Taylor Swift was thinking and if there were lyrics before and stuff like that. It's really interesting. Another one that I love is called And Nobody Dies in This One, which is by a couple of fantastic people who are friends of mine who I met on this amazing creative retreat in Wales earlier this year. The podcast is about queer love stories, so they have different guests on just telling their story, and I think that's really lovely. So yeah, there's a few of my recommendations for you, so please send me your recommendations. I need more stuff to listen to. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying Daily December so far, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!
Oh, the fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're still goodbying. As long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.